XRP holder, 2026 could be the year that finally changes your life. We finally get ours after fighting the SEC for the better part of close to half a decade, putting up with a bunch of toxic Bitcoin maximalists year after year after year. Seeing other coins take off last market cycle when XRP couldn't even hit a new all-time high because it was getting attacked by the SEC, all that stuff. But 2026 actually could finally be the year that changes your life if the bulls are correct. And we are finally going to see not just liquidity expansion, but a ridiculous increase in risk on appetite. Now, liquidity, of course, is typically what causes that. And so I'll just tell you at the outset, it's just, I would really love to hear the most coherent argument against the idea of liquidity being the backbone for all things markets. I mean, and we're talking every market, precious metals, stocks, crypto. I don't think the reason we don't hear that argument, I think, is, to be honest with you, I don't think it exists. So that's not to say there aren't risks. That's not to say that we couldn't be wrong in a certain sense. All of us people who are bulls out there, for example, what if? Of course, we're right about global liquidity expanding, and there's it's hard to take anybody seriously who says that it's not going to expand further this year and probably into 2027 to some degree. But what if global liquidity does expand, which is supposed to spur all of this? But what if we're wrong because ultimately that liquidity does not extend out into crypto land? What if that money doesn't get invested into crypto, which is the riskiest asset class on the planet? And what if it, as a result, you don't see us go further out the risk curve and we don't get an alt season? Well, all I can say to that concept is this, because to be clear, that's what would have to happen. If bulls are wrong, that's what would have to happen. And if that happens, all I can tell you right now is I wouldn't blame myself or anybody for not seeing that, because that would mean this time is different. That would be the first time in history, the 17 plus year history of the crypto asset class, that you get to a market cycle, liquidity does increase like it does every cycle, but then for the first time, because some unknown reason, it just doesn't flow into crypto. It gets into stocks maybe. Those stocks are risk on assets, but it just doesn't flow into crypto. So if that happens, I mean, that's the only thing that I can possibly see. Now, as to what would cause that, I don't know. If there's a good argument for why we should be concerned about that, I mean it. I am all ears, because I don't want to be wrong. And if I am wrong and that happens, I'd like to know beforehand so that I can talk about it on my channel. But you have to bring that information to me. I'm trying to find that information. I love opposing viewpoints. I'm just telling you, to this point, I haven't found it yet. But I keep thinking about this, and that's the closest I can get as to something that could deter us here. But outside of that, 2026 should be the year where we XRP holders finally get ours. Now, as I record this video, it is 7:45 p.m. Central Time, Friday, January 9th, 2026. XRP is $2.09. Bitcoin is at $90,629. And hang with me, because I've got commentary and analysis from 8 different XRP chart analysts. So this is going to be very heavy as an XRP specific video. First, I want to note this, though. There's this post from on-chain analytics firm Santiment. They wrote here, and this is just from this afternoon, 3:32 p.m. Since Bitcoin's $126,000 all-time high back on October 6th, cryptocurrencies have trailed equities and gold significantly. The past 3-month returns are gold plus 11%, S&P 500 plus 3%. Bitcoin, though, negative 26%. The crypto upside is there for a 2026 rebound. Okay, so Santiment, on-chain analytics firm, does fantastic work. Optimistic that there's plenty of opportunity for us in crypto land in 2026. Let me remind you, please, and take this seriously, that October 10th event, that liquidation event, that was a true black swan event. The biggest liquidation event in crypto history. Market makers absolutely were wounded, and it takes months to heal from that. That is what we've been going through. This isn't some sort of fluke here. It's no surprise that happened, and then we spent Q4 recovering. While equities, risk on assets there, they did fine, up a little bit. It wasn't like some raging Q4, but hey, up at least. S&P 500 anyway was up. So now that we're past that, we're into 2026. Liquidity should do nothing but increase. There's nothing but opportunity. In fact, did you know that we had a new all-time high for the S&P 500 again today? And you know what else we got? Another new all-time high for the Russell 2000. Look at this. This is the highest close in history at 2,624. It closed yesterday. Yesterday was an all-time high also at 2,603. Two all-time highs back to back, up 0.78% today. And there's so many analysts that are arguing that's because liquidity is expanding. And some analysts, not all of them, but some of the analysts that I follow are arguing that this is effectively the beginnings of price discovery here. And I don't have an opinion on whether or not this is or isn't the beginning, but I do buy into the narrative that even if this isn't it, we're going to see it. I do believe that we go higher here. And so there was this excellent post from chart analyst Psychedelic. Shared this with his 64,500 followers here. So the chart here, the yellow line, that's liquidity. The middle chart here, that is the IWM. That's the iShares Russell 2000 ETF. So that's BlackRock's ETF, the IWM. The IWM, to be clear, that's the ticker symbol for the ETF. And the name of the ETF is iShares Russell 2000 ETF. So the IWM is the ETF that tracks the actual Russell 2000 itself, which is just an index. And so in terms of the chart formation, it's effectively the same damn thing. So in this post, when he says IWM, that's Russell, just think Russell 2000. That's all you need to know. So that's what the middle chart is. The bottom chart here is Ethereum. And so here's what he wrote. And this post is just from earlier today. He said, let me lay this out for you as clear as I can. Liquidity leads, it always has. And there is one massive fundamental difference between right now and previous cycles. When liquidity breaks higher, it typically does it for an average of around 550 days. Right now, it has been 250 days. I don't know who still needs to hear this, but cycles are about liquidity, sort of magic and sorcery behind the 4-year cycle. The 4-year cycle existed because of the cyclical nature of liquidity. Liquidity has always been the driver of the 4-year cycle. Liquidity is still the driver of the cycle. It's just that because of when debt's getting rolled, it changes the timeline. And Raoul Paul's math is that it's changed from 4 years to about 5.4 years, which means that you're going to peak, he argues, perhaps as late as the end of 2026 in crypto land, but he's absolutely expecting an alt season. So when he says here, cycles are about liquidity and not time, yes, not enough people know that. That is fact. Unquestionably, that is fact. And then he says, we can see here that every single cycle, liquidity leads, breaks higher, then IWM follows, and Ethereum follows after. And folks, let me pause there. Now, why would that be the case? Why would every single cycle, the Russell 2000, the small cap stocks go, and then Ethereum goes? Well, think about this. So you have large caps go first, typically, in the stock market. Then you have small caps go because they're considered riskier. Then money flows into crypto because that's riskier. And then you go further out the risk curve from there. Ethereum's riskier than Bitcoin. That's how it's perceived. And then you get into mid caps and small caps. And those are perceived as even riskier. And so not until the appetite for risk is at its greatest will you finally see that liquidity flow into the riskiest assets in the riskiest asset class on the planet. That's why crypto gets hit last, and that's why small caps see the funds flow into them last, because that's when there's maximal. So if the risk increases a little bit, you don't jump to crypto, you jump to smaller cap stocks, and then you edge out further as your appetite for risk increases. That's how humans actually behave. That's how they've always behaved for the 17 plus years that crypto has existed. This time is not different, my friends. Humans are behaving like humans. People going people, all right? I'm just saying. Then he says, then when liquidity ranges, so do IWM and Ethereum. This is because both IWM and Ethereum follow liquidity. And right now, liquidity is in a recent increasing phase that still has time left to go. IWM has only just entered price discovery. Ethereum will follow. It's not an opinion, this is data, and the data is 100% hit rate on every cycle ever. It is very obvious to see the difference to every previous cycle top and where we are now. Spot on. And so the only thing that explains this is the rolling of the debt is happening later in the cycle than it has at any point in the history of crypto. And that's because of the pandemic. Instead of refinancing on average at 4 years, businesses refinanced further out because they love them sweet 0% interest rates that they weren't getting in years prior to that. That's why. Then we have this post from Chart Nerd, XRP. He says, all the liquidity waits below at $2. The bounce is inevitable. When it decides to occur, I will monitor the conditions and keep you updated. And so there is a warning here, I guess you could call it that we could go a little bit lower from here. He's hoping, not promising, but hoping that roughly that $2 level will hold. And I'm going to highlight here, I'm seeing tons of analysts note the significance of that particular level here. And so if we lose that, you could see a fair bit of a drop lower. In fact, one analyst thinks that we could get down to, I think she might have said like $1.65. And then separate from that, and I don't have this example in this video, but I've talked about it before. Credible Crypto has warned you could fall below $1.60 even before this most recent rally. And there's no indication from him that we should believe that we're out of the woods from that yet. So just because we ran to $2.41, if the market goes down, XRP could correct lower. The good news is, if that happens, it's not the end of the world. These things happen. It wouldn't structurally break anything, just to be clear. And so I don't say that to scare anybody. I say that so that if that happens, you don't have to get hit in the feels and then make a stupid ass financial decision based on emotions rather than logic, data, and reason. So do whatever you want to do. I'm just saying, make an informed decision rather than an emotional one. Use data. Use common sense. Here's a post from Crypto Tony. XRP update says, awaiting a dip to get in on XRP. And so he's coming at that from a trader perspective, but if you're wondering what's going to happen in the short term, the post is still useful. So his opinion is that we actually are likely to drop closer to that $2 level before moving higher. So if we go lower, he's not going to be afraid. If we go lower in price, that's when he'll buy. That's when he'd be enticed to purchase XRP. Here's a post from chart analyst Swish Trader. XRP successfully confirmed a deviation below the yellow key 3-day support/resistance level. Now already retesting. I'm rarely longing such quick retests as BTC ETH most likely rule the lower time frame, but if it consolidates above the box for some days and starts to compress, a long re-entry is valid. So there's another analyst saying, okay, so you could go a little bit lower, but if you hang out there, hold that support level, could rocket a fair bit higher. Here's a post from chart analyst The Great Matsby, also noting that level. He says, most important levels for XRP visualized. $2 is the orange horizontal level and $3.65 is the blue level. Support is holding. Okay, so that's not a promise from him, but he's noting that they're all noting the same level, $2. That is a key level. That was resistance. It has become support again. So hopefully we stay above it. It's not guaranteed. Some analysts, in fact, most analysts think it's more probable we will out of the ones that I follow, but not all of them think that's the most probable outcome. So I don't pretend to know what's happening in the short term. But again, let me reiterate. The good news is whether it holds or doesn't, that line right there, it's not the line in the sand as to whether XRP has an excellent 2026 or not. It would just be short-term. It would result in short-term lemming retail speculators being little bitches on the internet complaining, typing up a storm with their typing stuff with their fat little sausage fingers. That's what would happen. That's what we'd have to put up with. It wouldn't ruin 2026 though, just to be clear. Here's another one from the Great Matsby. He says, people don't like how this weekly candle looks right now for XRP, but that's because they aren't paying attention to the market symmetry. Resistance has still flipped to support. And so I have seen people talk about XRP on the weekly, but at least from his perspective here, look, he's like, support's holding, everything's fine, quit freaking out. Here's a post from chart analyst Dusty BC Crypto. XRP, this is an 8-hour chart. He says, seeing some positive signs appear near the 200 EMA for now. A little sideways price action, but it is normal after a big impulse. We still expect the new high to get taken out upcoming week. So he thinks we're going to, in relatively short order, go above that $2.41 level. I hope he's right. I would love to see that. And of course, I always say, though, if Bitcoin sneezes, just redo all your XRP charts. Because the truth is, like Bitcoin, it does tend to almost 100% of the time lead the market. So if we do see Bitcoin crater down further, which is possible, XRP and every other altcoin, they're going to respond. And it's going to be negative. Doesn't mean everything's broken. Just something to consider. I'm just saying. Here's a post from Crypto Wizard. XRP here says, similar formation, ? For over a year, XRP has been trading sideways. The last major explosive rally in XRP came from an identical setup. Can history repeat? And so he's optimistic. Yeah, we got to go. And so obviously you can see what he highlighted too. It's the falling wedge. Same thing that happened in 2024. I've seen so many analysts I follow point this out. And so he's looking, hey guys, looks kind of samey. Maybe we will see, this resume to the upside here. And I personally don't make bets on that because I'm not a chart guy myself. But it's plausible. That's not the craziest thing. But even if this does happen later in the year, I'm still very optimistic. 2026, this is the year that our lives can finally change. And look, I'm in the trenches with you guys too. Like I've been holding XRP for over 8 years now. I've never sold a single XRP in my life. I am patiently waiting. I want and need this too, just like the rest of you guys. And I'm just as hyper interested in this as you guys. And it's gonna impact my life just as many of you out there that have been waiting for years for this. I still think it's in the cards for us. I really do, or else I wouldn't waste my time running this channel. I'm hyper focused because I really do believe it's going to be that consequential for so many of us. I really believe that. It's just so obvious to me that XRP is an early winner in the crypto space. And so however long we got to wait, I'm just going to be there for it because it's going to come. There's going to be another rampage for XRP and a rally that melts faces. I do believe that. And I can't know that, and I could be wrong, and XRP goes to zero. I will always acknowledge that, but I do not believe that is the most probable outcome. Here's another post from Crypto Wizard. He's highlighting the total 2 chart, which is the top 125 coins by market cap, excluding Bitcoin. So it's altcoins. And he says, accumulation phase. Seen this before. Total 2 continues to trade in an uptrend. The 2 previous higher lows were perfect accumulation windows. Reversal to highs remains possible. Patience pays. Well, as I always say, markets find bottoms. They actually do. So, and that's the cool thing about someone that has my strategy in particular, which is the most unsophisticated investment strategy there is. If you're like me and you just buy stuff and then you refuse to tinker with positions no matter where price goes up or down, and you just don't let emotions get to you, you just hold and hold and hold year after year after year after year, whatever it takes. Then the cool thing is, even if my suspicion is wrong, like let's say that we're actually in a bear market and I'm wrong, and that's possible. I admit I could be wrong. Of course I admit I could be wrong. I don't know anything for sure, literally. Of course not. I have no ego about this. But the cool thing is, even if that's the case, I still win. Because whether we're in a bull market or a bear market, that changes nothing about my investment strategy. Literally 0 things. I will continue to hold until I'm presented with prices way higher. And if I'm enticed to sell, then I will sell. So that's the great thing about this. And I think that's the right approach for regular people like myself to take. You admit that you don't know better than everybody else. I mean, I'm sharing my opinions, but I don't think that I just know better. I don't think I'm some sort of wizard here. I'm not a finance guru or anything. I'm just a dude on the internet. And that's why I have my investment strategy. It's an acknowledgement that I don't know. And so what I'm doing is when it comes to investing, we are our own worst enemies. We are our greatest risk. And so what I'm doing is I'm removing the risk of myself. And I do that by, after I purchase, being very strict. I don't do anything after I purchase. For better or worse, I just write it out. I think it's more important for me to remove myself from that equation. So that's a tacit acknowledgement that I don't know for sure. And I'm not willing to mess this up by having strong conviction and then tinkering with positions. So yes, I have my conviction. And that's what I'm articulating on this channel. But no matter how strong my conviction is, I'm not going to let that impact the way in which I invest. I've had the same investment strategy since 2017. I will not change that no matter how strong my conviction is that we're in a bull market right now. Because in the off chance that I'm wrong, if I made investment decisions based on that, you can get slaughtered. Why do that when you know that if you just let, from cycle to cycle, you just let the years pass, your investments become worth a fortune? Why would you even mess with that? I'm not going to do that. Here's a post from chart analyst Casey Trades. XRP backtest of $2.03 in progress. $1.65 support still in play. A few days ago, XRP made a strong push into the macro 382 resistance at $2.41. This was exciting to see, but price didn't have the strength to break it. Because of that rejection, XRP is now naturally coming back down to backtest the macro 0.5 support at $2.03. I'm expecting $2.03 to get a reaction and likely see a bounce toward $2.26. However, because the move from $2.41 lacked follow-through, the $1.65 macro support scenario is still very much valid and continues to be my lean. Okay, so she's not promising, but she is warning you could see $1.65. And I haven't seen Credible Crypto retract his possible scenario where we get that low. I haven't seen anybody retract. Well, actually, I have seen some. I have seen some analysts say that they think that $2 is going to hold, so I take that back. But anyway, and then she says, if this deeper scenario is playing out, that bounce from $2.03 should fail below $2.41. That level is the key invalidation. Only a strong break above $2.41 would change the plan. Otherwise, structure favors another wave down that eventually targets $1.65 macro support. So she thinks it's actually more probable we're going lower. So we'll see. That's a minority opinion out of the analysts I follow, but if she's right, all the credit in the world where it's due. Chart analyst Stefan Crypto here. He says, on the weekly chart, XRP just flashed a powerful signal. The weekly RSI has broken back above its moving average. This is important because it usually only happens when momentum starts to shift decisively in favor of buyers. Since 2024, every previous RSI break above its moving average on the weekly time frame led to strong upside and follow through in price over the weeks that followed. And so you can see with the relative strength index here, this is what he's talking about, that cross right there, and historically what that has meant, dating back to 2024. So whether this is the moment, and some analysts do think that there's a good chance this is the moment, so whether that is the case or isn't the case, I still believe the best is yet ahead, and I'm just going to keep hanging out. That's that. I'm not a financial advisor. You should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. That would be a very, very, very bad idea.